All right, good afternoon. We're still a minute or two early. And I will tell you all once, and then I'll mention it again at the start of the meeting. If you look at the flyer that went out, these meetings are always from 1 to 3 p.m. I understand when you go to the website, it shows the Zoom meeting starts at 12:30. That is so we can bring on the speakers a little bit ahead of time and check their connections. So they've always been a 1 o'clock start, and they will continue to be a 1 o'clock start. So I know we're early arrivers and early risers, but 1 o'clock is the time to get in. So no, we haven't forgot about you or anything. It's just a 1 o'clock start time. And for today's very interesting and very informative meeting, you also have a somewhat rookie pilot running this. Our IT guy is running late, so Kevin is running late. So I am in charge, and kind of like a cruise ship, we're learning along the way. So I believe we'll be able to handle. I've been able to put our first speaker on as a guest host, so she's going to be ready to go. And give it just a minute, and then we will introduce and get going. So real quickly, while I've got you though, in addition to, please remember it's a 1 o'clock start. Also, I have information I'll share with you probably between the hour. I've picked a date for the 2021 seminar, which is going to be different this year, as I've alluded to in the past couple months. What we're going to do is 2 half days as opposed to 1 full day seminar. We're going to do 2 half days. The first half a day will be the traditional kind of Zoom seminar or Zoom meetings that we've gotten accustomed to. I've got some very good speakers lined up. I'm waiting to hear from a few more, but it'll be a very, very good lineup. And then in addition, the second day, both these days will be from 8 in the morning to noon. First one, like I said, via Zoom. Then the second day will be actually in a park in Sunrise, so we can still do the field kind of things where Mike is going to help with tree trimming. We're going to do the tree planting, et cetera, et cetera. So the seminar is going to be 2 half days. It should be very, very informative. I do have those dates, Greg, and I wrote them down, and they're on my sheet. I think it's November. It's the Tuesday, like the 14th and 15th, or 15th and 16th. They're on my board at work, of course, but I'll look for them here. In the meantime, I don't want to take time away from Samira. So what I would like to do is introduce Samira. Let us start with the first hour. As I've told y'all, I have not quite seen the other 2 speakers, so I'm going to go looking for them with a little bit of help. The chat box is open, but what Samira has asked is really she'll handle questions in the last 10 minutes. So if something comes up, you can feel free to add it to the chat box, and they will compile, and then in the last 10 minutes, Samira will be able to answer. All right, so seeing that we're past 1 o'clock, we're good to go. Miss Samira, I'll tell you again what a pleasure it is to meet you, and thank you for volunteering to do that. No, not volunteering, being drugged into doing this. Samira, I met or found through Varsity Tutors, and she is typically a tutor, so this is suddenly a large class as opposed to what she's traditionally doing. So I'm very glad she was open to the idea and the concept, and has agreed to work with us and teach us how to write better emails, which is something we all do, and many of us struggle with. So Samira, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm going to, if you see something or it's not right, let me know. I'm going to mute myself and work on finding the doctors.
Okay, will do. Thank you. So my name is Samira Washington, and in my other life, I do own a business where I do brand consulting, brand design, brand building. So I have a lot of experience with, I won't say a lot, I have some experience with workshops and things like that. I've done diversity and inclusion workshops. workshops on leadership. My passion is team building. So I enjoy those sort of things and increasing performance on teams throughout companies and organizations everywhere. So I enjoy that. To tell you a little bit about myself, my husband and I have 4 children, and some time ago, we had a passion project where we had 4 acres of land adjacent to our house. And so we just decided we were going to grow pumpkins. And so we went down to the local ag office and had the soil tested and found out it was the perfect kind of conditions for pumpkins. So as 2 people who grew up, myself in the suburbs, well, more of the beach, and my husband in the suburbs, we researched it, and we ended up also acquiring some land with black walnut trees and things like that. So it kind of kickstarted our passion for agriculture and trees and things that grow and sustainability. So I was pretty excited that I was assigned to William and what you guys are doing here. So without any further ado, we can go ahead and jump in. I do have some slides to share, so I am going to share my screen. Okay, I do have a request, William.
Go ahead. The IT person is here now, so your request is much more likely to work.
Okay, wonderful. So for sharing, it allows me to share photos and a list of other things. I actually just need to be able to share my screen, if that's possible.
Is she on a Mac by any chance?
Are you on a Mac?
I am.
They didn't fix that yet. It's broken in Zoom. I already told, I yelled at them about it last month.
Okay, then I can just export that as photos. Give me just a moment.
There's something wrong with that. I don't even check. I yelled at them about it because we had the same problem last month where all of a sudden you couldn't share a screen on a Mac.
Okay, problem
All right.
taken care of. All right, give me just a moment. As they say, technology is wonderful, except for when it's not. Okay. And I don't believe it's saved in order. Okay. I apologize for the delay. It'll be just a moment. Okay. So today we'll be talking about communication, specifically interoffice. So interoffice is different than communicating with friends and even with coworkers, because you guys are from different offices for the most part, from what I understand, and you have to communicate effectively across those distances. So today specifically, we're focusing on email. This is our very brief agenda. We'll briefly cover communication tools, email etiquette, how to compose an email, creating an email signature, and automatic responses. Okay, so just briefly, things that you should do with an email. There should be a very clear subject line. One of the other important parts of having a clear subject line is that it makes it very easy to search for whatever line of conversation that you're looking for, whatever thread you're looking for. For example, If I were to email someone, I'm just giving an example, but if I were to email someone concerning logos, as I'm communicating with that person, even if I use more than one email to communicate with them, I would address it to, I'd fill in the to field. And then when I got to the subject, I would say logos, and then also have specifically whatever I'm speaking about, logo space turnaround time. Okay, so that it's very specific, and we'll cover that a little more in detail in just a moment. You do want it to be short, concise, and it should include proper grammar and spelling. One of the things that's different with email from, say, text or even inter-office messaging, or if your team happens to use GroupMe or anything like that, the communication expectations are very different. Email is still, for the most part, a relatively formal form of communication. So with email, you try to avoid using contractions. You try to avoid using text lingo. For example, you wouldn't say you are for your, you would write out the entire word, okay? You also want to make sure that you're using proper capitalization, you're using commas and periods where they ought to be, and that sort of thing. So in addition to email, you have text messages, instant messaging, and again, that depends on your teams and how you guys are communicating with each other, as well as social media. And social media has an entirely different set of rules as well. Okay, things we should not do. We should not use capital letters in an email because it does make it come across as though you're raising your voice, and we'll address that again a little bit later. We don't want to use reply to all. Replying to all in terms of etiquette, which we'll cover more in depth, everyone who is included on that message does not need to be included on your reply unless it is specifically asked to do so. I have been in a member of an organization. It was a volunteer situation, but I volunteered in an organization, and that was how they preferred to communicate. So everyone on that volunteer team would receive an email and they would say, please reply to all, because they wanted everyone on the email chain to be aware of every reply in the thread. And that's fine. They were using it more as a long-term conversation versus a one-time email. And that's okay as well. You just have to understand the rules of engagement based on whatever the expectation is. Okay, I'm going to skip down just a little bit. When it comes to certain communications within your companies or organizations and things that you're communicating, on that last bullet point, pricing, proposals, reports, service agreement, and any other proprietary information, it should always go through a formal channel, whether that is through a letter that is mailed, whether it's through email or an inter-office memo. It should not be done through text message or instant messaging. Those are considerably less formal. I know things have changed a lot, especially in the last 2 years. So that's become a slightly more flexible. But for the most part, email is generally the preferred method, and you always have a paper trail with it as well, which is helpful. So first we want to discuss the audience. Okay, so you need to decide who your email is going to. And you have your main recipients. Those are going to be people that it's sort of like you're in a group. So if you think of email as a counterpart to face-to-face communication, if I'm having a conversation with one person, but we're surrounded by other people, you would consider that person that I'm making eye contact with the main recipient. And then everyone else who's there but won't have direct input into the conversation, they are our CC people. And then BCC is, they've put here an audience who only needs to see the first email. We'll get into some more details about that in just a second. Sometimes with using a CC or a BCC, it's a situation in which you have to escalate communication. For example, you've emailed this person several times and they failed to respond, whatever your policy is, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, and the matter had not been rectified. And so then you would then CC a superior on that as well. That way the recipient is aware that it's been escalated, but depending on the culture of your organization, that can be perceived as an act of aggression, email aggression. So we get into 2CC or not to 2CC. So you CC when you want to keep someone in the loop. You want to enhance the email's urgency. And again, that does require an escalation. That's not something that I would do lightly. Prior to CCing a higher up, I would, I love collaboration. So in a team setting, I prefer to collaborate with my teammates, and I only escalate when it's absolutely necessary. So in that situation, I would attempt to email the person probably 2 times. And if it's someone that I know they might have a lot on their plate, or there's some other mitigating factor, I would even give them up to 3 times via email. If there are certain deadlines, obviously that's not a luxury that you have. I would then try a phone call to that individual. So I would try to exhaust everything with that individual prior to escalating. One of the things in teams that I've led, I would always, anytime that it was escalated to me, I wanted to find out, okay, what did you do to communicate with this person prior to it coming across my desk? And so once I was able to ascertain that, then I was able to rectify the situation. Okay, so the other way is when you temporarily take on a coworker's tasks. So if I'm filling in for someone, then I would CC them on what I'm doing because I'm taking over for them. I also use it in a training situation. So if I am training someone to take on a new position, I would email someone, a direct person number 1, and I would CC person number 2, who is my person in training. I wouldn't do that without previously establishing that this will be the path of communication with both parties involved first. And the last one is to introduce 2 of your contacts to each other. So I would send them an email, and then I would, the first person number 1, I would put them in the 2 category, or you could address it to both senders, or you can put one of them in the CC, either way. When we don't want to CC, if you're calling someone out, and again, there should be a mutual respect among team members, among colleagues, among coworkers. And so that mutual respect also creates a foundation for trust, and trust is a bedrock of communication, healthy communication. And when we think about trust, sometimes we think of it in terms of a romantic relationship, but essentially any interaction we have with another human being requires a certain amount of trust. For example, when you go to a doctor's office, there's a certain amount of trust you are placing in that physician and his or her level of expertise and ability to treat you effectively. So doing something like improperly CCing someone, it can embarrass your coworker. It can cause them to feel disrespected, and it can also cause a breach of trust. So you want to be very mindful of that. If you don't have consent to CC someone, meaning there is certain information that is below someone's pay grade, meaning it's only for management level, or it's only for this particular level. If you're speaking from one organization to another, and there are things that are proprietary in your organization that should not be shared outside of it, then you do not have consent to CC someone outside of that pre-established loop of information, and that is important. Okay, if the CC list is long, and they've listed here 5 or 6 people, for the organization I was a part of, it would usually be about 3 people, and it would consider to be excessive, and then you'd want to find another way of communicating, especially if those individuals didn't have previous communication with one another before. So it's kind of like when you are I'm trying to think of an analogy. Okay, we'll go with baking. So if you're preparing a cake, you may have all of the correct ingredients, but there are some things, especially if you're cooking like French food and it's got to be, it's got to rise and emulsify in a certain way. You have to make sure that it's done in order. And it's the order of mixing in ingredients is just as important as the ingredients themselves. It's the same way when you are communicating in work and business and through different agencies and organizations and with coworkers and team members. If you expect a response from whomever you've CC'd, then you don't want to CC them. CC is a carbon copy, so it's more like a formality, an indirect formality. If you're expecting a response from that person, then you either want to establish ahead of time, whether it's face-to-face or through a previous email. I'm going to CC you on the next few communications I have with Tom, because Tom and I wanted you in the loop. And once you've evaluated the project that we've updated you on in these 3 emails, would you please respond? Okay, and so you're communicating clearly what the expectation is. BCCing. BCCing is one of those things that you don't do lightly, and you don't do it for no reason. So you want to, sharing a company newsletter, that's not a big deal. It also allows you to protect the identity of whoever it is that you want to include on this, because they don't want everything, they don't want their email address included. That's fine. Again, that's something that you have to establish on the front end. When you're using an extensive mailing list, when your recipients don't know each other, and again, you've got to have a lot of other details involved in that before you make that decision. And impersonal emails that don't warrant responses. And then the last occasion, which is probably the most commonly used method of BCC, is when you want to expose something nefarious. So there are times when a coworker or someone like that needs to be, when you have to blow the whistle, okay, so to speak. And in order to do that, you want to be able to include a higher up without that person knowing that you have in fact escalated it. Again, that shouldn't be a typical method of response. It's a tool that should be reserved only for those particular occasions or incidents. So we don't want to use BCC when the message is personal, when you're emailing coworkers, and if the BCC person, if there's even a 1% chance that they're going to reply to this email, and the person that you've sent it directly to is not aware that you've BCC'd this person, then that can become very awkward, to say the least. Okay, I won't summarize it because we just basically went over that. So now we want to talk about the subject. And you don't want to say important, because there's a lot of different things with that. For one, if you're saying this is important, then by default, you're saying every other email you're sending is not important. I also try to explain to team members that there's a difference between important and urgent. Okay, so if it is urgent or time sensitive, I would absolutely include that, which you can find under the good examples. If, for example, it says your bookshop order delivery December 2nd. I can get a lot of information just out of that subject line. I happen to get a lot of emails, whether it's from clients or students that I'm tutoring or whatever the case may be. And as even my children email me, but as I receive those, I have sort of a routine where first thing in the morning, I go through my morning routine. And then when I'm sitting down to check email, I review for anything urgent. And so as I'm going through that, I'm just scanning those lines. If nothing is urgent, then I actually have a set time throughout later on in my day, between sessions and between clients, where I check my email. Anything urgent, I handle it right away. So it's important for me that that's communicated clearly in the subject line. The second example I think is wonderful, and I enjoy those, where it says client report revision. So when I'm searching for this thread, looking for all the client reports, I'm able to put in the search on my email and just put in client reports, and everything that has to do with client reports comes up for me. They also included the deadline to let me know it's urgent. And it says, please review by 4 p.m. So then I know how to prioritize that when I go through my first pass of my email. Last one, it says expansion report extension requested until Friday. That's also very clear cut. Then you want to have a greeting, okay? And your greeting should be professional and concise. It depends on your organization and how your communications go with using hi in an email or not. I generally do not use hi in an email. Anytime I'm communicating, even via text to a superior or a colleague that I don't know well, I avoid using hi, okay? So I will tend to use hello. I don't really use dear anymore. I do enjoy using good afternoon. I've occasionally used greetings, but generally you want to have a very brief, clear-cut greeting for your email. Then your first component is you want to have some sort of brief pleasantry. Now, in our modern society, this has taken a back seat. However, and that's primarily because of texting. So even with texting, and if you're texting your colleagues and coworkers and team members and things like that, or even a superior, it's customary that the first communication of that day include a brief pleasantry. Good morning, so-and-so. Thank you for such and such, okay? And then if you are going to have several more communications that day, you don't have to be as formal as you were that very first communication. So then you can say, following up to our conversation, so on and so forth, okay? But you still want to have that brief introduction, okay? And there's some examples for you on the screen. It was great to meet you at last night's networking event. Thank you for sharing your article on management strategies. The findings are valuable, so on and so forth. Okay, component number 2, you want to make your request. So whatever it is that you're asking for, it needs to be clear. As someone who tends to miss things that are not very clear, I love straight shooters, because if you sugarcoat something too much, I'll completely miss it entirely. So I appreciate, especially when I'm reading emails, if someone gets to the bottom line and just says, this is what I'm looking for. Okay, because when I look at email, I'm looking for what's actionable. What is it that I need to do to respond to this? What is it that they want from me? So they say, the examples are, please provide feedback on the budget. Can you provide in the kickoff meeting? Can you participate in the kickoff meeting for next Thursday? Even with that, I would follow up with how I expect them to participate. So there's a training event that I'm facilitating mid-October. And for this, I have, I created the agenda ahead of time. I emailed it to those that'll be involved. And then for the breakout sessions, I'm collaborating with another instructor, and we're facilitating a breakout session. So in the communication to him, I asked, can you participate? Can you co-facilitate this breakout session with me? And then I listed the areas that I want him to cover specifically. And I let him know the time will be limited to 30 minutes. So we'll have to go through it very quickly, and I need it to be hands-on and have a high level of engagement. So there's no confusion as to how we need to engage in this. Last example, did you have any revisions to the final report? Okay, so it's very clear. And again, if it's not concise and direct, it can be very easy to overlook. And if you don't get a response, or if you don't get action, it may be because of how you've worded the email, not so much that this individual intended to disrespect you or usurp your authority, or whatever the case may be. When it comes to including attachments, for for emails, if there's an attachment, it shows the paperclip somewhere on the screen so that you understand that there is something attached. I usually like to include in the email as well that there is an attachment. The reason being is sometimes the way that emails are sent, if I have a logo in my email signature, if I have a header or a specific formatting set up, it will also show up as an attachment, although it's a meaningless attachment and no one needs to, it's not actionable. So you want to make sure that you communicate that in the email as well. They give you a bad example. You may find this resource useful in preparing the report. The reason that's considered a bad example is because it's, in terms of formatting, it's not visually pleasing, okay? I also, you may find this useful, is somewhat direct, but it's also still fairly indirect. So if I'm including this as, say, for example, this is just for your reference, then this is a very good way to communicate that. If it's something that I need someone to read and report back on or fill out or take action with, then you would want to word that differently and say, please read the technical writing resource and respond once you've come to a conclusion about it. Okay, so you want to include that in there so that they understand this is something that you act on versus I'm just sharing this information with you and it's just for you to know. Requests, again, need to be very, very clear. A bad example is, can you take care of this or let me know what you think? These aren't always bad examples. If this is someone that you work with very closely and you guys understand one another and you have a system of communicating already set up, it may still be effective. But what they've listed for good examples is, Sarah, can you forward the survey to all the staff by Friday at noon, please? For example, I'm going to be, except for that one training, I'll be out of the office for all of October. So the things that I've delegated, I've said, can you please, this is the agenda for this is the format for this is the, whatever, the template for this. Can you please forward it to the staff by October 1st? Okay, the second example is, I'd appreciate your feedback on the draft agenda. If you have any edits, please send them by tomorrow, Tuesday at 10. That is a very good example because it's, when you read it, it's actionable, you know exactly what you need to do. It's clear. It's also polite because you're saying please. Sometimes, and the thing about human beings is that we're all wired very, very differently. And so there are some individuals who are very straightforward. And when it comes to social niceties, it's not a natural thing for them. And so they have to apply more effort to it. So there are people that I've worked with and team members and people that I've coached, they're very straightforward. So they would say, here's the draft agenda, edit it and return it to me tomorrow by 10. For other people, they could perceive that as someone who's being rude or doesn't really care about them as a person. They're only focused on tasks. And we've all heard the expression task oriented. I am by nature task oriented. I am motivated highly simply by accomplishing a task or getting something off of my to-do list or out of my queue. And so this is something that I have to constantly work on, and I have to be mindful of it in my communication with other people, including family. And I have to remember, okay, just because this isn't the way I communicate, this is the industry standard for communication. And so we want to make sure that on the sending side of the email and on the receiving side of the email, we allow for the factor of humanity. Okay, so, and I think we'll get into that about tone in just a moment, but that good example, it's clear, it gives an actionable request, and it gives a specific time frame. Wrapping up your email, you want to have a closing message. Your closing message is, while your greeting and even the content is pretty much what's required in order to satisfy this communication requirement, your closing message should be personal. So there should be some aspect of it that reflects your personality. Thank you for your time is sufficient. I look forward to your response. Kind regards, warm regards, sincerely. You can also make it very personal, like I work with a group of students with art. And so when I communicate with them, my closing for them is stay creative. And then I sign my name. For clients that I do the brand coaching and brand design and brand consulting, I say, let the dreams begin. That's my standard closing for that. And then for other clients, it just depends on whatever it is, but it should be something personal that reflects your personality while still remaining professional. Okay. Now, signatures. Okay. This is really a matter of preference. Although I have titles and all that kind of stuff, whatever, I don't really use them in emails. I prefer just like kind of, person to person. But if you have a formal title that you want included, include it in your email signature. Your email signature communicates to the other person, this is how I would like to be addressed. Okay. So you can put Dr. John Smith, I could sign Samira Washington, MBA. I generally respond by, it depends on the client and the nature of the relationship. I'll usually say J. Samira, and that's it. And I leave off my last name, okay? You can also just use your first name and that's it. Anything like that, okay? Now, after you have your name, you can have your position and then also the name of your organization. Okay, so, and it's not always necessary to state your position for someone, but sometimes it helps them to understand that you're only handling a piece of this. For example, in our introduction, William explained clearly, he said, I'm not the tech guy, I'm not IT. So by understanding that he's not IT, we're able to then calibrate our expectations of the services rendered based on what his position actually is. And so it helps us to mitigate expectations and not expect something from someone that isn't in their purview at all. So name, position, and then the name of your organization. Okay. And then some people also include under their phone number, if they have a web address, anything like that, that may help them or help continue the conversation or line of communication with said individuals. Okay, I like to use automatic signatures. As I've mentioned, I wear a couple of different hats. So I do have a different automatic signature for the different hats that I wear. So I know that you guys are all part of this organization, but you also have your individual work situations that you guys have. So in that situation, you would have an intra-office automatic signature, meaning within your own organization, and then also within this group of people that we're addressing today. So you can have a different one for each one. You just have to be mindful of which one you're using for which email so that it's appropriate and consistent. So to get to those, you want to go under File. I also wanted to let anybody know, if you would like my slides, I'd be more than happy to email them to you. So you can let William know, and then I'll coordinate with him to get them to you. I know this is a lot of note taking, so you could have them and you can refer back to it as well. So you want to select File, Options, Mail, and then it will give you signatures. And I'll show you a screenshot of that in just a moment. And then you want to select the account that you'd like to use, signatures and stationery, and then you go through the next steps and you add your relevant information. So the first page that you'd be looking for, again, would be your account information. And this is an Outlook. I understand that other people use other email. You may use Gmail or whatever the case may be. This is just using Outlook for today. So you go into account settings under account information. And then your next screen, it will look something like this, where it'll say Outlook options. And then you're going to select email signature. And in the box on the upper left, you'll put in there your signature that you want to have edited. You're choosing your email account over to the right. You can select whether you want it for new messages or replies and forwards. And you can select the font size and all of that sort of thing. It's standard for most emails to be typed in a 10 or a 12 for the font size. However, if I had to go between a 10 and a 12, I usually err on the side of the 12. And that's because if you ever communicate with someone who is dyslexic or even has stealth dyslexia, which most people are undiagnosed, they just end up concluding that they don't enjoy reading. And the reason they don't enjoy reading is because it's more taxing on their brain than for someone who's wired typically. But using a 12 size font is generally more favorable because it helps people who need assistance to read, like myself, or someone who also may have a learning disability, whether they realize it or not, or whether you realize it or not, it's just helpful in general. Okay, and so the next screen, it's going to say type a name for this signature. And so that's where you put in the name that you would like to have. And they're giving you an example here. Now whoever this example is, they're promoting their art exhibit. Okay, so you can have something like that, but for the context that you guys are using it, it's not also marketing. So you may have like also a quote that you enjoy. On one of my email signatures, I use a quote from Richard Feynman about learning in the most irreverent way possible and what absolutely excites you. I love that quote, so I use it in my email signature. I don't use that for everything. Again, it depends on which hat I'm wearing for the day. So you can also include a quote there that you enjoy that inspires people. You can use the tagline for your company, whatever that may be. And then here is a very useful tool, because every once in a while, we all need a mulligan. We need a do-over. And so if you're in Gmail, it allows you in settings to go in and select how long you want to have available a cancellation period. So you send the email and you have a moment of clarity right after you hit send and you're like, I shouldn't have sent that. You can go back and you can undo it. In Outlook, you can recall an unread email, which is very effective. I've probably only ever had to do it maybe 3 times, but those 3 times it was absolutely an emergency and I needed to really get it back. And so I was able to retrieve it before anything catastrophic happened, and it had a very happy ending. Okay, automatic responses. When we want to use them, we want to use them for vacation. If we're going to be out of the office, you can also use them as an acknowledgement. What do I mean by that? During certain seasons, I tend to have a higher inflow of email. And if I'm in that season, then it actually takes me longer to respond to said emails. So I have an automatic response that will let them know that the email has been received and that I will respond to it within the next 48 hours. That way, if they don't get an immediate reply, they're like, oh, she's not responding to my email, or then they resort to calling or texting, that sort of thing. So if you are going to have a day off or you have scheduled days off and you are out of the office, you can schedule it for those days off, which is very helpful to let them know that you are not in the office for that day. If you are resigning from a position, and let's say you stay on for 2 weeks or 90 days or whatever the case is to help onboard your replacement, you can have that automatic response programmed so that they're aware that you will be transitioning out of this position, either into beautiful retirement somewhere on a beach, hopefully, or a cabin in the woods or something. It just helps them to understand, what's going on, and it helps redirect that. That shouldn't happen without having a upfront conversation first. So there should be some initial communication about that, and then that is for the follow-up. Also, if you are now delegating, so whether it's that your position has been bisected and now the duties are split among 2 people, or you've gotten promoted, whatever the case may be, you're delegating some tasks. You can have an automated response to say, I'm no longer handling this. Please see Richard about this, in accounting, whatever. Okay. And then I am going to walk us through this. It's a photo, so my link is not live. Give me 1 second. And I'll share. And then I'll also be ready for questions very shortly if you guys happen to have any. Okay, so this is how to set automatic replies in Outlook if it's something that you need to do. Again, in my slides, if you guys request them, then this link will be included. It is a very useful tool for easy reference. But basically, you're going to go into, it depends on if you're on Outlook.com, if it's a non-exchange account versus an exchange account, but you just basically follow those steps. It also tells you how to know if you have an exchange account or not. And this is basically how to create a template for that. So you select new mail, you compose your subject, you click file and save as, and then it will save it as a template. I love templates because the more you can automate, the less bandwidth you have to take up throughout your day, and it gives you more space to be able to do everything else you need to do. Then you select save, and you go through all of that. All right, I am actually just going to stop here for a moment and check in with you guys and see if you have any questions that I can answer for you.
Samira, I've been monitoring so far, outside of a lot of personal compliments you've been receiving. I have not seen any comments. There's a big disagreement going on here in our little local office about reply all. Some people who are sadly mistaken believe that reply all should be used. Sorry, Richard, and I'm one that it does not. So no, you're good, and go ahead and keep going. And the only thing I would say, if you've got a minute or two and you want to add a little bit about texting too, or some do's and don'ts of texting, that would be fine. But otherwise, keep
Absolutely
on your target. Thank you.
Okay, so with texting, texting is an interesting form of communication. A few things that I'll go through with texting. I don't happen to have any slides prepared, but I will use my whiteboard here. So with texting, we have, there's a lot of different rules that apply. So part of it is based on the level of familiarity that you have with the individual. So for example, an organization that I volunteer within, I have a superior, and then there's me, and then I have a team of about 12 individuals. So in this situation, when I'm replying to my superior, although we went to the same college, we were at one time roommates, it doesn't matter for me. I like to have a clear delineation between my personal and professional life. And so anytime that I'm addressing her via email, or even to my team and within the group, I always address her with her title. okay? Or I address her with a certain amount of respect. So in emails, I almost never say hi or hey or anything very casual to her. I do absolutely adore GIFs and memes. I think they're incredible. I'm so glad that I'm alive in a time where they exist, because I think they are very funny. And in many cases, they communicate what it is that I want to say much better than words that I could type out, and they're also faster. However, when you are in a work situation, anytime it's lateral, depending on how well you know the individual, those things are welcome. You want to make sure that they are innocuous, meaning they are not suggestive sexually in any kind of way, or could be misinterpreted. So the ones that I use, like for example, if someone requested a report by a certain amount of time, I might respond with a GIF that says, right away, there was a time when someone texted me and I was in the middle of a session. I sent the GIF of a cat typing on the keyboard really fast. For whatever reason, it really made me laugh very hard. And so I sent it, and it was received well, and it was fine. We've already had that sort of relationship. That wasn't our first time communication or initial communication. That being said, I do have team members that are under 30, and they communicate very differently. And even the 20 to 30, so I'd say 20 to 25, they communicate differently even than the 25 to 30. So I would actually bisect those categories. And this is a gross generalization, I understand. I have a 17-year-old daughter, and she communicates via text with me in full sentences. She has to have her proper grammar and everything. Whereas the rest of our kids, they will send emojis or GIFs or whatever. So it really depends on the individual. But once you've established that rapport with someone, then you can communicate that way. The only danger with that is that if then I have to address that person about something more serious, or there's something more urgent that comes up, they can misinterpret my formality at that point, because they were under the impression that we were so cool, if that makes sense. So you want to make sure that the rules of engagement are understood up front. And again, with texting, if it's the first communication I have with that individual in the day, that the first one is always formal for me. So I would say, hello, so-and-so, comma, I enjoyed our conversation yesterday, and I would like to follow up. Would you please give me a call at your earliest convenience? My availability is such and such, okay? Now, when that person responds, I don't then have to say, hello, so-and-so, thank you for your reply, okay? So then you can say, you can, they say, okay, I'm available Monday at 2 p.m. Great. I will set that in my calendar, and I will speak to you then. Okay, and so then it doesn't require a whole lot of follow-up. If you have a question after that, then you can easily come back and say, you don't have to say, oh, following this. You can just say, also, I had one more thing. And then you can go in like that. Now, if it was several hours between that communication, then you may want to have a semi-formal follow-up with that. When it comes to group text is probably the bane of my existence. I do not enjoy being included in group text. If you were to look at my phone right now, every group text that I happen to be in, I have gone into my phone and I have silenced my notifications. Okay. This tends to be, this is sort of a long story, but I'll try to make it short. When you are working with people, it's very important to understand them. We say, for the most part, people say, well, do you speak any other language? You say, no, I'm a native English speaker, or I'm bilingual, so on and so forth. In reality, we each have our own language and our own way of communication. I like to divide it into input and output. So my input way of communicating is not always the same as my output. For example, I I enjoy listening when people speak in a, so if I'm in a situation where I'm already involved in a task, it's very difficult for me to shift gears and go into like a personal story or things like that. I am an introvert, and B, again, I'm wired for, I'm very task oriented, very performance driven. If it doesn't achieve results, I probably won't do it. And then my husband, on the other hand, he's extroverted, and he's very people oriented versus task oriented. And so if I am working or in the middle of a task, it's challenging for me to shift gears and go to this other thing. So when I am communicating with people, it's important to know, are they task oriented? Are they introverts? So why is that relevant? For most people who are introverted, they prefer text messages versus a phone call. Most extroverts prefer a phone call versus a text. Now, there's also this thing nowadays where people FaceTime as a means of using the phone. I don't enjoy that. I almost never FaceTime unless it's like, you know, a family member or something. So all of these things have to do with knowing the party with whom you're communicating and remembering that. There are times when, especially if I'm communicating with someone, I actually will store, like when I store their contact information in my phone, I would put William, very warm, prefers phone conversations. And that way, whenever I need to communicate with him again, I understand that this is his preferred method of communication. I have a question. Is it acceptable to respond to a text? Please email me so I can more fully understand your request so that I can reduce the ongoing texting. Absolutely. It's very important and effective. Again, communication is based on trust and respect. And so one of the ways that you build that trust with the other individual you're communicating with is to clearly delineate your boundaries. So for example, if you want to elaborate on something without texting, definitely you can request that you can communicate via email or a conversation or even a face-to-face. Okay. And it's completely up to you, those boundaries that you set. And it's also up to the person if they choose not to communicate that way as well. But it's completely acceptable. And I appreciate when someone communicates with me that way. All right. So that, so group texting, and then I'll close here. With group texting, you should only do a group text if it's absolutely necessary. And also if the boundaries of that thread of conversation is established up front. For example, if there's a project that I'm planning and I'm collaborating with other people about it, I say, okay, I'm going to establish a group text. Please don't over communicate in the group, only post if it's something urgent. Okay, so you're just communicating that up front. Sometimes groups like to communicate through GroupMe, Band. There's a lot of those project management apps that I love that work for your team and your team dynamics. Sometimes people meet on Google Meet or whatever the case may be, WebEx, Zoom, anything like that. All right, 3 minutes left. Are there any questions that I can answer? Any additional questions that I can answer?
Samira, there was one that got passed over from the second one. I'll quickly read it. It says, when you answer emails that may be over several days, do you recommend using auto signature with every response, name, title, or just versus using the name?
Okay, so you can set up an automatic signature for texting as well as email. With email, I recommend it with every communication because it's just standard and the person understands that it's standard. So I think that's completely acceptable. For texting, actually don't use automatic signatures for texting. Some people do, and that's okay. I wouldn't use it ongoing with every text, especially over several days.
Great. Samira, I say you can't see all the accolades coming in, but very good. It's really well received. Your information is fantastic. I think you've brought us all up at least one notch, and maybe we need three notches of improvement, but fantastic. I truly thank you. If there's any contact information that you want to use that people may want to do the same and use you for some other professional organizations, please feel free, send it to me. We'll post it on the LIAF website. We'd love to advertise your expertise.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Have a very good day. Appreciate it.
You as well. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, to all the rest of you, what we're going to do real quickly is, Richard, if you would give Mike Orphanides. Michael, I hope you're there. We're going to turn your microphone on for our minute with Mike. You got him?
Yeah, I asked him to unmute, so he should be.
Oh, Michael, you may be muting on your own computer,
No,
so
he was a second.
there we go. Are you there, Mike?
He was a second ago. Hold on, let me ask him to unmute again.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir, you are on. Go
All
right
right.
ahead, Mike.
Okay, well, greetings, everyone. Happy fall. I just had a few things I wanted to bring to your attention that calendar-wise, we're still rocking and rolling over here at the Extension Building. Most of our programs are virtual. We still do pesticide applicator testing the first and third Tuesday of the month. So if you're needing to do that, you need to get a voucher online. And I think the best way to access us these days is to just get on our newsletter list, because our newsletter has so much good information, and including lots of blogs. Donna has been a very prolific blogger in the last few months. She and I actually co-labored on one on root pruning. What do you do when you've got trees that you want to relocate that are established? And I was very blessed to be able to get photos from Mike Marshall about root pruning techniques and so forth. Also from tree movers right up here in southern Palm Beach County. They shared some thoughts and reviewed the article, and I'm actually going to make a fact sheet out of it. But you know, if we've got trees we need to relocate, how much time in terms of preparation with root pruning, and what do you need to do to keep them in condition until they're moved? And then, you know, some thoughts and comments about how you care for them then, you know, in the aftermath of being moved to their new location. So get on our newsletter. If you're having trouble getting a hold of us, just email me at m as in Mike, ORF @ufl.edu. That's morph, MORF @ufl.edu. A couple of other things going on. We had our first class last night for our new LIAF certification candidates, and there were 9 or 10 individuals that all participated, and we went over the current grades and standards for you know, grading hardwood trees. Palm School will be coming up, and you're going to hear a lot more about that from Dr. McMillan shortly. But I will be speaking on palm grading at that event, which comes on October 26th, Palm School. Couple of other calendar events. If you're needing to renew or do your GIBMP for the first time, we have a class on October 20th. And for those folks that need limited commercial landscape maintenance CEUs or would like to sit for the exam, we have a prep class on that on November 18th. Of course, the tree trimming classes are ongoing. Again, all of this virtual. And once the numbers go down significantly and we can start resuming some small in-person classes, I can't wait. I really am missing that. And so are some of our clientele, but we're getting by in the meantime with Zoom. Just a few other things to mention. Water Matters Day, we've had some questions about that. Yes, Broward County is going to have its Water Matters Day for 2021 on the 16th of October. That's a Saturday at Treetops Park. It's a non-contact event, so you have to basically register in order to get your trees. They're calling it COVID Relief, RELEAF. I thought that was kind of interesting, creative. So the good news is that it's a very popular event. The bad news is there's very few trees left. I just went on. There is 1 fire bush left and 31 key thatch palms. everything else is already spoken for, and that's what you have to do. You have to register by going to the website, and yeah, that is Water Matters at Broward.org. And if you have any residents, or if you're still so inclined, you want to participate. Again, it's a non-contact event. It's mostly a tree pickup day, 8:30 to 2:30 at Treetops Park in Davie on the 16th of October. The other thing I wanted to mention is we have gotten now 2 cities in Broward, Fort Lauderdale and Hallandale, that have blackout periods. Those blackout periods, I believe some of them may be ending today, being the 30th of September, but that's a big change from previous years because we didn't have any blackout cities in Broward County for applying or transporting nutrients through nitrogen and potassium anyway. But we now have 2 that are in that blackout zone, if you will. And if you want to find, there's a really cool phone app. Donna will put that link in the chat, and you can get for the whole state of Florida, it gives you the details on each and every municipal or county blackout regarding fertilization. And so I know for those of you that are commercial applicators, that's a pretty important thing to do. You know, I guess I tell you this in that I think it's a handy tool, it's a handy phone app, but in a way, it's kind of disappointing that, you know, we've got all these cooks in the kitchen now with all of their unique regs and rules, when, you know, the state of Florida looks like a patchwork quilt in terms of, you know, who's got restrictions and who doesn't. But it is what it is. I think what it shows is that decision makers at multiple levels are trying to respond to the water quality challenges that we face across the state. And I still maintain if you abide by the guidelines in the UF-IFAS GIBMP curriculum, you should not be a part of the problem, but part of the solution. So, Donna, did you want to say anything? Or okay, she says she's good. So, like I said, she's going to put in the chat that link to that fertilizer phone app. It covers the whole state of Florida. If you have any more questions, I guess you know how to email me or Donna for that matter, and we'll be happy to help you out. So everyone stay well and stay tuned. William, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Thanks, Mike. Hi, I'm William Burns. Oh, wait, I'm not. No, I was just going to also mention in the blackout periods, Miami-Dade County looks like they've extended theirs from May 15th to the end of October. So it's gotten, I think, a little bit longer. It may have already been May in Miami-Dade, but the last time I had looked, I thought it was June to end of October. So just looked while you were talking, and that could impact some of you. It certainly impacts us. I am Kevin Hunt, and I'm the president of the Broward chapter, and I am pleased to introduce our 2 speakers also this afternoon. We have got, as it's indicated here on our invite, we're going to get schooled on some palms by 2 new additions to the University of Florida IFAS Research Center. First, I'd like to introduce Dr. Micah McMillan. She's an assistant professor of palm horticulture at the Fort Lauderdale Research and Education Center, and her research will primarily focus on palm and ornamental plants from seed to establishment. I'd also like to introduce Dr. Bram Dillon, assistant professor of plant pathology at the Fort Lauderdale Research and Education Center. He is a molecular plant pathologist working on fungal pathogens of palms and other tropical plants. And Lord knows he's going to have his hands full on that front down here. Without further ado, I've passed the baton to one or both of you. So please jump in and school us on some palm fun.
Hi, it's me. Can you hear me?
Hear you perfectly. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to share my screen and let me know if you guys can see it.
Looks good so far.
Okay. All righty. Now can you see that? Is that working for you?
You bet.
It's moving.
Okay, yep, I think we're on page 2, or maybe the last page. Nope.
There we go. Good.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Micah McMillan, and I am the new Palm Port Specialist here at the Fort Lauderdale Research and Education Center. And since I am new, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on myself. I have a PhD from the University of Florida. In fact, here at the Fort Lauderdale Research and Education Center, where I work with Dr. John Sissar. I studied the influence of hydrophobicity and inorganic amendments and surfactants on turfgrass establishment growth in constructed root zone mixes. But while I was doing that, I also worked in industry. So I developed ag chemical materials for use in landscape, agriculture, and in the greenhouse markets. My current appointment is here at the University of Florida at Fort Lauderdale, and my appointment is 70% extension and 30% research. So if you guys are, football fans, I don't know how many of you are football fans, but people ask me, who do you root for, Auburn or UF? I say I root for the blue and the orange. So if you got that, then you're a football fan. So this is how it is. We have a brand new Palm team. Brian Bader, who I'm sure many of you know, he is the entomologist, and he has been doing all the lethal bronzing disease, working with that, and he's done a fantastic job. So he's been here for about 5 years. And then you're going to meet Bram, but he is the palm mycologist or pathologist, working with all that Ganoderma and all of the disease issues that we're going to have in palms. But Bram, I think, started, and he'll tell you when he talks afterwards, I think he started right before I did. So, and then you have me, and I am working on water, fertility, and soil, the environmental effects of that. So here's your new palm team, and we're all excited to be here. We are full, on front running, getting tons of questions, so that's good. Let me see. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I have been getting questions on since I started in April. So we'll talk a little bit about what are the palm issues that are here in Florida. And from my standpoint, the amount of emails and phone calls, I've been keeping track of them, where they come from, who they're coming from, what are the specific palms, sometimes the soil conditions, environmental conditions. And for me, just tallying since April, those have, number one, been lethal bronzing. So Brian is forefront and center. So Brian will sometimes get some questions on lethal bronzing, and he'll forward them to me saying, I think this might be a nutrient deficiency. And we know why there's some confusion there, some very similar conditions there. So again, if I get something that looks like a nutrient deficiency from a homeowner, and I think it might be lethal bronzing, I forward it to Brian. So it's good to have this team together with all of our own specialties. Same goes with Bram and diseases. If there's some kind of disease and somebody's forwarded it to me, I will definitely, I'm not a pathologist, so I will forward that to Bram. And then of course, for me, the number third questions that I have received has been on fertility. So, and cultural practices following a close fourth. But fertility happens to be the number one question that I've received from homeowners, from landscapers, and from a lot of the government agencies, FDOT, places like that. So the number one deficiency that I get questioned on is the potassium deficiency. And I will just give a shout out to Tim Brochat and Monica Elliott, because they did a fantastic job here at UF when they were here. They have made it pretty easy. They've done a great job of outlining and showing photos of all these deficiencies so they can help us to diagnose some of these questions that we receive via email. So with potassium deficiency, we have the yellow and orange spots on the oldest leaves, kind of that speckled appearance. And then we get the leaf tip necrosis. So very curly tips. Something that I think I've seen a lot of over the summer was with the Phoenix species, I was seeing a lot of brittle tips, indicating potassium deficiency. Almost like you could walk up to the palm and snap it. So of course, why do we get such potassium deficiency in palms? It's because some of the high nitrogen fertilizer leads to the potassium deficiency. Again, with potassium, it can express itself differently in different palm species. So part of my research will be looking at a wider variety of palm species with the potassium deficiency. Second is the magnesium deficiencies. So this is always a tricky one because sometimes the magnesium deficiency can be overlain with the potassium deficiency. But when it's magnesium, you have the light color on the outer margins or the center of the leaves remain green. So I always kind of look at that. One of the extension agents told me, remember it like G is for green in the middle. And that occurs normally at the low and mid canopy. And of course, with magnesium deficiency, it can be exacerbated by a high potassium fertilizer. So some people may have a potassium issue, fertilize for it, and then when they over fertilize for it, that can lead to some of the magnesium deficiencies. And if you look here, I should point this out with my pointer here, is you can see the dark green through the middle and then the yellow on the sides. And then of course, right here, that's indicative of the potassium deficiency, that curling, the curling leaves would indicate the potassium deficiency. And third would be boron deficiency. So for me, this is a little bit of an easy one because it always occurs on the new leaves. And it's easy because it almost looks like an accordion effect. Here in this picture, you can see the accordion, meaning the leaves are kind of bent up like an accordion. We can tell that it's occurring on the newer leaves. And sometimes we have the unopened spear leaves, which in this picture, you can't really see it. But that unopened spear leaf is an indication of boron deficiency particularly on this coconut palm. We have the crown bends in one direction. So here it's leaning over to the left. And with the new leaves, sometimes they grow downward, which is a good indicator of boron deficiency. And of course, the necrotic inflorescence, which you can see right here. Why do we have boron deficiency in Florida soils? It's because they are leached by rainfall or they have a high soil pH or soils with high soil pH and a dry soil, which yes, that could be Florida when we go through some of the dry seasons. But for us during the rainy season where we get a big rainfall, boron leaches right through, but then it will come back because we have the breakdown of the organic matter, which will release boron. So like I said, Tim and Monica did a fantastic job on their fertilizer studies, did a great job of documenting it. What I would like to focus on is continue on with some of the fertilizer trials, but some of the questions I've received over the past 4 or 5 months is with the fertilizer of granular versus injecting fertilizer. A lot of questions are, have you done this? What does UF recommend on injecting fertilizer into palms? And so a lot of the questions that are raised when we talk about injecting fertilizer is the effect of the injection on the vascular system, because we don't want to go around putting holes in palms and then, number one, not sealing them back up, or sealing it back up and letting some disease or some insects get into that hole. Number two, from a certain aspect of the environment, we want to know is if we're using the granular fertilizer and we're spreading that granular fertilizer right next to a water body where the palm is located, would the environmental impact be less if we were injecting the fertilizer? I have been to a number of homes or some park areas where the palm is right next to the water body or it's right next to a pool, very little turf grass. So would we be better injecting the fertilizer into the palm rather than spreading the granular fertilizer near the water body or near an obviously an open pool? What is the cost? Is it more expensive? Is it cost prohibitive to inject? And how often are we going to be doing that? 2-3 times a year? Number 4 is the injection sites. This one comes up quite a bit, the bottom versus near the crown. Why are we injecting at the bottom and it has to be translocated up all the way to the top of the palm? Number two, why don't we inject near the crown? Again, those are just some of the questions that, as I'm keeping track of all of them, get raised quite a bit. And of course, the time to visual results and duration with the fertilizer, granular fertilizer versus injecting it. Would it be better? Would we get faster results with injecting versus the granular fertilizer? And of course, the preventative versus treatment effects. Could we do this if the palm was in severe potassium deficiency or had severe boron deficiency? Could we go ahead and treat that palm and then go back with a granular application and maintain the preventative fertilizer deficiency effects? So with that, a lot of question raised on injecting versus granular applications. And we go back to the best management practices. Those were very well established with Tim, great recommendations on the amount of fertilizer, when to fertilize, and particularly with all the fertilizer restrictions that we're going through right now, we would like to see maybe giving a little more insight into where injection may be an option in severe deficiency cases or near water bodies, and looking at it from injecting maybe just micronutrients only, like boron, instead of applying a granular fertilizer. So these are some of the questions that have been raised, and we would definitely like to be looking at that. So if you guys have questions or if you'd like to comment on that, you can email me and try to put it into a protocol so we can evaluate it fully. But that is something that we are going to be focusing on. The second area that I would like to take a look at is transplant stress. So for me, my background in industry has been helping homeowners or the landscape industry, trying to figure out, hey, we're moving trees or plants, what's the best way to transplant them? And into what kind of soil are we transplanting it? Are there amendments or surfactants or certain things that we can use to have a higher % success with transplants? I don't know about you, but I live in a 1950s home here in Florida, and this is what my soil looks like. I'm basically living on concrete. So my neighbors hate me because I like to evaluate a lot of products when I transplant, and some of them are not successful. But it's a good documentation of what will grow on soils that are basically concrete. So when I'm looking at transplant stress, in the past, I've evaluated biochars, and I'd certainly like to continue to do that. And that is a limitless amount of product that we can take and use. So that's always a good option. Compost is another product that I would like to evaluate in terms of transplant stress. And another one is surfactants. Why would I use surfactants? Well, because we know that if we are using a surfactant, you can reduce the amount of water you're using. And there's actually been data that's documented that if you're using a surfactant, it improves water uptake, keeps the soil moisture for longer, and it also reduces the time to wilt or the time to stress. But the issue with surfactants is that they don't last as long. I think the longest surfactant application might be 90 days. So that would be something that we would definitely be evaluating. Of course, biostimulants are always of interest, and mycorrhizae. I do have some, I did get my master's degree evaluating mycorrhizae in turfgrass systems. So I'd like to continue that with palms. We know with mycorrhizae that you can plant a palm and improve, or you can plant many different types of trees and plant and different shrubs, and then amend the soil with a mycorrhizae that is specific to that particular plant. They have been doing it in mining soils and have had a great response where the mycorrhizae actually helps the plant to uptake water and in terms of drought stress. So that would be one of our focuses as well. Of course, we want to take a look at if you're going to be transplanting, if you've already planted the palm, can you amend with some of these products, a biochar or a compost, to help with some of that transplant stress? Or do we want to go ahead and mix the soil that you currently have with a biochar or compost and see what the response will be in terms of time to wilt and also the quality of the palm. So what are the costs of applications? We always want to take that into account. And of course, the duration of the components. I know that there were a lot of palms up around the Orlando area that wilted and had a lot of issues along the highways with drought stress. So could we go ahead and apply some of these materials and have them last 3 or 4 months just in time for some rainfall or for the irrigation to turn back on? That would be one of our questions. We know that we are absolutely looking at reduction in water everywhere, particularly here in Florida. But we also want to take a look at not only how long some of these materials last and how effective they are, but also what is the amount of water that they can help with the plant and help the plant to uptake. And how do we alter the soil moisture? Is it available to the palm? Is it not available to the palm? That's something that we would like to evaluate. So, something else that I would like to take a look at is, and part of my research is saltwater intrusion in salinity studies. So I want to expand the species of palms that have been evaluated for salinity studies, because when we have done the research before around the world, it's typically with date palms or it's with some of the African oil palms. So we want to extend the number of species that are evaluated for salinity studies, maybe expand it to foxtails, maybe to royal palms, queens, something along those lines where we can give more information to the homeowners as Florida deals with a lot more saltwater intrusion, particularly along the coast. We also know that in the middle of Florida, there is a lot of saltwater intruding on some of the wells. So we're irrigating with higher saline water. And what is the effect on palms if your water is high in salts? So very little data on there out there, particularly with the duration of salinity effects, meaning when you water with palms with high saline water, or irrigate with high saline water, how long does the palm survive? Is it, a couple weeks, a couple days? That is something that is of interest to me. And of course, the duration, like we said, of the submergence. Are we looking at the groundwater? Are we looking at just planting the palm in some soils that are constantly submerged in some of the salt water that comes up from the coast? How would we do that? With visual and root evaluations, or looking at some new equipment that we would keep the palm planted, and so we could just drop in a little root imager, and it could help us determine what's the effect of some of the salt water on palms. So. Now, something else that we're going to be working on as a palm team from the Fort Lauderdale Research and Education Center is the palm walk or demonstration garden. Here we have a picture of the research center, and you can see where the building is right here. And then over here is a big area of palms that we have, but we have a very large area over here that we would like to make a what we're calling a palm walk. Putting different species of palms, and maybe working with Montgomery Botanical Garden in the conservation of palms, and helping to maybe establish some of these species where we can tell whether they do well here in Florida or not, do well during hurricane periods or not. And of course, when we plant these palms, it's an evaluation of them. So it's going to be a working garden. We are also going to have some areas where we're going to be looking at that transplant stress and looking at different planting depths with different species of palms. Hopefully Mike will be able to help us with some of the pruning and have you as a homeowner or a Florida stakeholder come in and see these in real time, not just hear about me talk about them, but we want to be able to show you, what we're working on constantly. So it's always going from this year we're working on salinity studies. The next year we're working on water studies, and these are constantly in play so that you can see what the effects are long term. Because some of these palms are very slow growers, so some of these studies will be in for a while. So when we're talking about rooting studies, keeping them in the soil for a longer period of time and giving you more of a time-lapse study. And of course, we're not just going to be looking at palms. There's going to be other landscape plants there as well, and maybe some different ground covers. But the intention is to make it not only a beautiful area where you see some different palms, but also to see what we're working on here at Fort Lauderdale, what Brian is working on and Bram are working on. I know that Dr. Moore, who's probably listening right now, she's also going to be working with us on some of the fertility studies for palms. So this is an idea where we would like the public to come in, schools, master gardener programs, and to bring you in and say, this is what we're seeing with some of these products that we're evaluating, surfactants, compost, and this is the response on these types of palms. Whether it's drought stress and, or we're looking at the injection of fertilizers, that's something that you can see in real time. You can stop by and visit us, and we can have these palm short courses so that you can come in and be able to see that and not just read about it. So last but not least, I think I went into Bram's time. Sorry about that, Bram, but it's 2021 Palm Short Course time, and it is on October 26th. We are going to see, you need to register by October 18th. But it is a wonderful group of speakers here. We have Dr. Patrick Griffith. He's going to be speaking for the first time at Fort Lauderdale Research and Education Center. He is from Montgomery Botanical Garden, and he will be talking about the challenges and successes in palm conservation. Brian is definitely going to be talking about lethal bronzing. Bram will be talking about diseases. Kim will be talking about fertilizer. And I'll be giving an update on not only some of our research and amendment work, but also some of the fertilizer work. So it's a great group of people. And I can't forget Mike Orphanides is going to be doing some of the pruning works. And thank you very much, Mike. So it's a great group of people. You get to meet us. You can talk to us, ask us questions, and we can get a feel for what's needed out in the state of Florida for to meet your needs. And to make you more successful. So please register. It's open right now on Eventbrite. You can follow that link. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. And that wraps my talk.
Thank you, Micah. And Bram, I see you right there. So if you'd like to go ahead, start up.
All right. You guys can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Are my slides visible?
Yes.
Okay.
Looks good.
All right. Well, yeah. First of all, I'd like to thank Mike Orphanides for making this introduction, and Bill and LIAF for making us shining stars instantly. When I got here about a year and a half ago, Mike and I had talked about talking to all of y'all, but unfortunately we couldn't make it happen. But finally, we are here. So I'd like to take this opportunity to share with you what we have been doing in terms of research in the lab. And also, so you're aware of what kind of activities, what capacity, what capabilities we have as a plant pathology lab here. We're right across from this, across the street from Mike. And, this would also give us an opportunity to know what kind of issues or challenges you face and how we can connect and build a relationship. So here are some of the pictures I've taken over since I've been here. And before I get into what we have been doing, I just want to ask a question. It's an open-ended question. I know I can't listen to anybody's response, but what I want to highlight is the importance of diseases, plant diseases. So, it's a good guess that everybody's here in the audience and everybody we talked to are familiar with COVID-19, coronavirus disease that was identified in year 2019. But my question was, how many of you are familiar with the abbreviation TR4? So TR4, it stands for tropical race 4. It's of a fungus called Fusarium oxysporum that causes Panama disease on bananas. And so why is this important? Up until the World War II, the cultivar of banana that was most widely grown was Gros Michel, and was nearly eradicated by tropical race 1 in the 1950s of the same pathogen. Since then, scientists, plant breeders, plant pathologists, they found a source, which is the Cavendish, and that occupies 99% of banana exports worldwide. So, we avoided a disaster by finding a new genetic resource, that was resistant to TR1, a tropical race 1. But since then, the pathogen has evolved. Now we have TR4, which is moving across the world. And once again, we are at the same, it's the same story, right? Now Cavendish is threatened by TR4 and we need to look for new sources of resistance. This is ongoing work. I think there has been a lot of progress is being made and we should be able to avoid this, pathosystem. So, with that, I just wanted to highlight what we as plant pathologists and what you as consumers are facing with, diseases that are ongoing and diseases that might come in. And I want to now shift gears and talk about, the who, the what, the why we are here and, what we are doing. So in terms of my background, I'm originally from India. I did my bachelor's and master's in plant breeding and in agriculture from India. And I moved to Purdue University, where I did my PhD in plant pathology. After that, I've been at University of British Columbia, Vancouver, BC. And before I came here, became a Gator, I was a Razorback, with the University of Arkansas for a couple of years. Over the years, I've worked with a number of pathosystems, mostly focusing on the disease aspect. But as pathologists, we've worked with, the host and the pathogens. So worked with, row crops, with trees, white pines and poplars, corn and wheat and spinach. Worked a lot of different pathosystems and worked on a lot of different aspects, the idea being to bring disease management strategies, understanding host pathogen interactions and building on that. So going from the lab to the field is the idea here. So I am a palm mycologist. That's the mandate of the position here. So I'm a pathologist, but I'm working mainly on fungal diseases of palms to start out with, diversifying hopefully into other tropical plants, but now the focus currently is on palms. And like I said, as plant pathologists, we study both the host and the pathogen. So how the pathogen can cause disease, and then how the host has, resistance to some of these pathogens. So, basically leveraging my skill set in plant pathology, and my understanding of fungal biology, genetics, and genomics to study palm pathogens and enable diagnostics and management of diseases is the goal here. I guess everybody's familiar with a lot of diseases that we have in Florida. I'm not going to go into the details of the diagnostics or the management. Rather, I'll talk about some of the work that we have been doing, and some of the work that, I see us doing in the future. Some of the diseases that are lethal. Again, this is a slide that I'm borrowed from my predecessor, Monica Elliott, or the pictures. Fusarium wilt Ganoderma butt rot, Telebiopsis, and pink rot. These are some of the lethal diseases that are common in Florida on palms. When I got here, for the most part for the major part of the first year I was here, I was by myself, working on Ganoderma butt rot of palms. And I don't need to, preach to you all, but just so that everybody is on the same page, this is caused by a pathogen or a fungus named Ganoderma zonotum. Whether it's a true pathogen is still, some people have still questions about that, but it can still, if it gets on palms, it can get in and cause death, or kill the palm. It's a significant, causes significant economic damage to oil palm industry in Southeast Asia. So there is a sister species of Ganoderma which is wreaking havoc in Southeast Asia. Currently, the diagnosis of this pathogen is based on whether you see a conch. On the right-hand side, you can see a conch. And by the time the conchs appear, it's already too late. And as with other lethal pathogens of palms, there are no chemical culture control measures, which as my research program and, will strive to change this recommendation. We're working on that, and I can talk about some of that aspect. So, for Ganoderma, we started working, some of the approaches that we're taking is, one is to improve diagnosis. So we don't have to wait for the conch to appear. Can we do diagnosis earlier? And also, can we detect trunk rot? Under ideal conditions, I would want to have to do a non-invasive method, but right now we're trying sonic tomography, which is kind of invasive. It has some little setup time, but we're working to see if this would work or not. And then, like I said, for management, looking at cultural or chemical or biological control measures. So, in terms of a diagnostic assay, like I mentioned, the earlier assay was based on a conch, but we want to use the DNA of the pathogen. If the pathogen is present, we can extract the pathogen from the woody tissue of the palm on which it is growing and use that DNA to detect it. And this is done by a method called PCR. It stands for polymerase chain reaction. Basically, it's an enzyme which will make multiple copies, millions of copies, and then you can visualize them. And this is, as far as a diagnostic assay goes, you could have results based on, in 3-4 days. If the pathogen is present, you'll see a clear result. This assay that we have developed, what we did was we took 14 different Ganoderma species. So Andrew Lloyd, who was working with Jason Smith in Gainesville, they had a big collection. So we used that as our basis to differentiate, to develop a species-specific assay, meaning it will only detect a zonotum. If any other Ganoderma species is present, it won't detect it. And the rationale for that is 99.9% of times you see a Ganoderma conch on palms, it is caused by single species, Ganoderma zonotum. So we wanted it to be really specific and not be confused by Ganoderma that you see on oaks or other hardwoods. And we can detect Ganoderma from not only from wood, but from soil samples as well. So here, what it looks like visually, you can see I've listed here a panel on the top. There are 4 lanes, or 4 numbers for each of the species listed here. Tuberculosum, polychromum, zonotum is in the middle here. You can see some extra bands. This 1, 2, and 3. So in lane 1, 2, and 3, these are empty for all the other species. But for zonotum, you have bands in lane 1, 2, and 3. So this is where we say it's a specific assay. It will only pick up zonotum, nothing else. And it works on soil as well as woody tissue. And we tested, like I said, 14 different species that are common in North America, commonly found. So a little bit about, what we have, till now we have tested like 59 samples. This is just a summary of all the data we have. What I I'm trying to show you here is the first two columns is what is the expected result and what we observed. If the expected is positive, that means we knew there is Ganoderma on the tree, on the palm trunk, and we observed a positive. So, you can see that 37% of times we have a positive. And then there were a few times when we were expecting a positive result, but we observed a negative. So all these positive samples that we had, they were from older palm. They were not even trunks, they were mostly stumps. So at that point, although you can see a conch, the tissue, the woody tissue is mostly degraded, and a lot of other fungi come in and overtake the niche that Ganoderma has developed in these trunks. And the idea of this assay is not to test stumps, it's to test active infections in the landscape. Where the palm is still alive, can you detect it? And can you detect it before the conch is visible? So if you look at that, then this is a really robust assay. This here, we were trying to see if it would pick up from any sample that comes to us. So now we know it won't work on degraded woody tissue, but on fresh samples, it always works. And where we knew it was negative, it was always negative. So the other take home from here is there are no false negatives that show up. If Ganoderma is not there, we'll never detect Ganoderma in that sample. So again, what is the application for this assay? It will help in early diagnosis, can detect the Ganoderma before the conchs appear. The technology we used is really simple, and it's routinely used in all diagnostic labs. There are other technologies available which are only very few labs have access to, so we didn't want to end up in a situation where we can't readily use this assay or distribute it freely. So we use this PCR, which is a simple assay. And then eventually the idea is to develop a quantitative assay. From that, what I mean is we should be able to tell if Ganoderma is present in a small amount or a very large amount. What is the inoculum level in the soil also. That would help us, when you're picking new sites, we could actually sample soil and say, okay, Ganoderma load is really low or it's really high. Don't plant palms there. So it could be used in a lot of different ways. I'm going to skip this second part of the slide. We could talk about it on some other day, but the other aspect, so this was the diagnostics part. The other aspect was, looking whether we can look at trunk decay. So here we're using an instrument by Picus, which uses sound waves. It measures the velocity of sound waves in the wood to detect decay and cavities. So we don't have to cut the trunk to see the decay. We use this instrument. So acoustic velocity, it depends on the wood density and elasticity. So when you have disease or you have rot inside the trunk, this will change the density of the wood. And so the travel of the sound waves would change. And there are sensors in this Picus machine that will pick up these changes in the sound waves. So what we do is, here, what I'm showing here on the right is a profile of a clear trunk. There is no damage in this trunk. And again, we're using this on foxtails. This is our pilot study. We had 3 foxtails in the study where there was no damage observed in terms of conchs on the trunk. And you can see these are clean. These are all uniform color. So in terms of the scale on top here, you can see dark brown color is 100% integrity of the wood. So here at the center, we have a few foxtails which are infected. What we do is we tap in nails on the bottom around the circumference of the trunk. We attach our sensors. The sensors are attached to this machine on the Picus sonic tomograph. And then we use a hammer to tap on these nails, and these sound waves are picked up. So what I'm showing here is a trunk with a conch, but what was counterintuitive was you don't see any damage on the trunk. So here, what you see is these conchs, this is highly unique. This doesn't happen, or I haven't seen it happen. You probably might have with your experience. But what is happening here is it is growing on the external stilt roots. It hasn't made its way to the trunk. It eventually will. But what we see here are conchs that are growing outside on the roots. They are not present on the trunk up here. So the trunk is still free of damage. Never, or I haven't seen Ganoderma coming out or getting into the roots and coming out from the roots and not going into the trunk. But here, this palm, you can see in the middle here, you can see some dead leaves on the left. There are 4 dead leaves on this, or fronds. And again, we plugged in. And here you can see a conch on the trunk. And you can see the damage here, the green, the purple, and the blue meaning the highest damaged area, the area with the rot. Another example here is this palm at the top is almost dead. There are no open fronds. Here we had a lot more conchs on the trunk. There are 2 different sites here. And even when I was tapping in the nails, they were softer tissue. So the nails went in really easily. And you can see 1/2 of the palm trunk is already rotted out. So sonic tomography, I think, can be used. But the case here, what we were trying to do is see if we can use it before even the conch show up. Again, early diagnosis is the objective. So, and that, you can see clear trunks when there is no damage. But then we still need to test it on other palms, increase our sample size to see how robust is this data. So far, it seems like it is working. Again, so, a lot of the work I'm showing you, the diagnostics and the sonic acoustics is based on the infection we see in the landscape. The other aspect of as a plant pathologist is we need to kill the plants before we start saving them. So in line of that, we are assembling an inoculation pipeline. So we can take healthy palms, we can infect them with the pathogen, and then the idea being, if you have other control measures, whether cultural or biological or chemical, we can test them on diseased palms. We don't have to wait or go hunt for infected, large trees in the landscape and start our treatments there. Part of the other aspect was, when we're trying to propagate palms from seeds, there were some papers, a few by Tim also, which say you have to remove the husk. And we did this similar experiment. We were able to replicate those findings for Robellinis and Ericas. We saw a significant improvement of germination when you remove the husk. It's more related to nursery applications. Plus, for us, it is a good information to have when we're growing them in the greenhouse. But here, what I'm showing on the right is wheat berries, where you can see these white mycelial growth is Ganoderma growing on it. So we can use that to infect palms in the greenhouse. This is ongoing. It takes a long time for infection to show up, as you know. Here we're setting up the infection. So, with that, I wanted to, this is kind of like the summary or overall, 30,000-foot view of the kind of activities we are doing or want to do with respect to palms and pathogens in the lab. Developing of assays which help in diagnosis, developing, genome sequencing, which will feed into species-specific assay. You can find sequences which are specific to Ganoderma. Having inoculation assays so we can test how long does it take for the fungus to get in, how long does it stay inside growing and then produces a conch. If we have inoculation assays, we can test control methods like chemicals or fungicides, or biologicals. Can we produce conchs in the lab? Can we produce spores in the lab? How long can the spores survive in the field. So it all, ties to the disease cycle or the fungal life cycle in the landscape. Do these make any compounds when they're rotting wood? Can we detect them? Can we use that for early diagnosis? These are some of the activities that I would like to do moving forward. And beyond the lab aspect, in the landscape, there are a lot of palms that are being grown. There are new cultivars or hybrids that are being developed. So in case of mule palms here that I show the picture on the right, there are 2 key breeders that do all the crosses, and then they send seedlings across the state to distributors. And then these are grown across multiple sites in the state. So we were sampling, and they were having some issues. So we sampled mule palms across 2 locations and found some pathogens or some fungi. Pasteurlotiopsis was one of them. But it is an endophyte and a pathogen, so we still need to test whether it's really a pathogen. We found another one, which is called nigrospora. This has not been described on palms in the US. It has been described in the Middle East. So there are fungi or there are pathogens that might be out there that have not been described. So one aspect is, to find diversity of fungi that are present that might be becoming serious threats in the future. So we have to be proactive at discovering what is out there and what sort of damage they can cause and how we can stay ahead of the curve. The other aspect I talked about was biocontrol agents. On the right, what you see here are 3 plates. All the white mycelial stuff growing on the outside, the white and the brown part, that's Ganoderma zonatum. We can grow them on artificial media in the plate. In the middle are bacteria that can suppress the growth. You can see it was growing all fine. Then when it encounters this bacteria, it slows down the growth. This on the bottom right-hand corner, this bacteria in the middle slowed down the growth the most. You can see a lot of clear area in the middle. The one right above it had a little less effect. And then the one towards the left has the least effect, but at least they're producing chemicals or metabolites that can suppress the growth. The idea is to find such microorganisms that can suppress the growth of pathogens, and then eventually identify these compounds with the idea of using them in the landscape. So, as opposed to using fungicides, if you have biologicals, the more environmental friendly. The challenges in this is, things that might work or seem to work in the lab, it may be hard to get them or to get results in the field. So that is a challenge, of course, but we need to try, we need to find compounds that we could use. In addition to, so here's another screen we're doing. Trichoderma is another fungus, but it kills other fungus. There are commercial products available that are being currently used in lawns and ornamentals and in tree nurseries. But the idea here is if you can find trichoderma that are local, they will be more effective than trichoderma that is available off the shelf. So here we're trying to identify trichoderma strains that will suppress these pathogens, fungal palm pathogens. I don't have data that I'm showing here, but we are also working on fungicides to look at efficacy of fungicides against these specific pathogens. Recently, we got some chemicals from Syngenta. Micah also has contacts. She's getting in some other chemicals that I want to try out in the lab. So we want to see if these are really efficacious in the lab, and then we can move to the landscape and to do field trials. Again, so these are some of the activities that we are doing in the lab, and these are not all, but certainly we would continue working in these directions and try to find disease management and control strategies for these lethal fungal pathogens that cause damage in Florida landscape. With that, this is my office number. This is our address here. The other aspect that I didn't talk about is, we're trying to start up a diagnostic lab, based on the diagnosis assay for Ganoderma. We are in the process of developing an assay for Thalaviopsis. An assay for Fusarium already exists. And I know if you have samples, you can send them to Gainesville or you can send them to Homestead. But we are trying to set up a lab here at Fort Lauderdale at FLRIC, so you can also send samples to us in the near future. With that, I would like to say thank you, and hopefully we have some time for some questions.
Well, Bram and Micah, thank you very much. That was super informative. I appreciate that from both of you. It's been a long time since Tim and Monica were active, and the Palm School has been down for a while. So I'm really glad to hear, as all the green industry is, that large part of our landscape is going to be picked back up with two experts such as yourself. So I think that's going to be fantastic. I think the Palm School will hopefully be very well attended and continue the large successful Palm School that it has been in the past. So we really thank you all very much. Yeah, we're right up against the hour, so there are some questions which I'm not going to ask because I don't want to put over the hour. Bram, the only question that we do have is that wallpaper behind you, or is that a very good backdrop?
Well, that's a poster I found, and then I using it as a backdrop now. But it's the same thing as hanging on the wall behind me. So if I remove this, you'll still see it, but only partially.
I love it. I love it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all. To the rest of the group, I'm going to go back on, put my face up there. To the rest of the group, real fast, just so you all know, the seminar dates are set. The November 16th and November 17th. It's going to be 2 half days, as I said, both from 8 to 12 in the morning. The keynote speaker, if you all have not heard, Valerie Trent, I believe it's Dr. Valerie Trent. She's going to be talking on dendrochronology, and if you've not heard her podcast, it's fantastic. It's fantastic, and the whole seminar is shaping up. We will, of course, need participants. We will need sponsors, and we don't have very long to put this together. So you'll be getting a lot of notices pretty quickly, and I will accept all help that's offered. Outside of that, people that have attended today, I can't stress how much information was passed to you all, and we've been trying to pull this off every month. So it's important that you're here, but it's also important that you help us through LIAF to stay active and stay afloat. Make sure you paid your dues. Our treasurer is out there, and she is twice texting me saying, please remind people to pay their dues from last year, for next year, whatever it is. And people that need CEUs, we need to make sure that when you sign on, that your name appears there so that we can get that list to Terrell McCombs and that he can give proper CEU credits. There's a lot of time spent at the end of all these trying to make sure that people that need recertification have their CEUs. So make sure you're on there. There's a couple people, Catherine Hall showing up twice in here. I'm sure that's somebody else under a different name, et cetera, et cetera. So please make sure you're signed on correctly and you're all caught up on your dues. And Richard has informed me that you can even now sign up for next month's meeting on the internet. So we hope to see you there. It is 3 o'clock and we always try and end on time. So thank you all. Have a great month. Stay safe and see you soon. Bye.